Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and Midnight is heading into beta testing period very soon, which means even more players will finally get access to test out and play some of the different class changes that are upcoming with this expansion. And there's a lot to take a look at, as they're essentially doing an entire class overhaul for every single spec out there, with the class of Shaman in particular receiving some of the biggest simplifications and straightforward gameplay redesigns we've ever seen in a very long while. Apparently the changes this class is getting are going to be some of the best if you are a new player to Shaman or an inexperienced player, because picking up all three specs is going to be much easier than ever before. However, if you're a veteran of this class, apparently you may find yourself a little bit disappointed in some of the changes and the direction that the class is going forward. So for today's video, I want to do a much closer deep dive into all of the major changes happening to the class of Shaman, class talents, hero talents, and the spec talents, which I'll leave chat remarks down below if you want to skip around to all the different sections in the future. But with that being said, if you guys want to keep up with regular Midnight class updates over on the channel, be sure to follow and subscribe. But otherwise, let's take a closer look at what's happening to one of my favorite alts that I've ever enjoyed so far within War Within expansion. So first thing up, we have our hero talents for Shaman, starting with the Farseer. And for Farseer, for the most part, we're just seeing a brand new column on the right hand side with a couple of new options. The first one being really passive, just an intellect buff for Resto and Elemental for every single ancestor you have active. Right now it's only 1% in buff, though I could see that number get brought up a little, because I usually can get maybe 2 or 3 ancestors up, which I mean 3 intellect percent buff for a short bit during burst is kind of nice, but I could see that number go up just a little bit. Then we have Wind Speaker, where the cast times of abilities, mostly based on abilities such as Healing Surge, Chain Heal, and Lava Burst, are all reduced by 10%, as well as Mystic Knowledge, which for Elemental just gives you only a higher chance for Lava Surge to proc, but for Resto, for 8 seconds after casting Ancestral Swiftness, the recharge rate of your Riptide is increased by 30%, and you also get a shorter cooldown of a Lava Surge procs. So for them, it's kind of like the 11.2 Koresh tier set, more or less sneaking its way into the hero talents. For Stormbringer, we also get a brand new talent column with some familiar effects. For the first one, we have Stormwell, where for Elemental, your Storm Elemental lasts for 2 seconds longer, and Stormkeeper generates 10 Maelstrom. While for Enhancement, Wind Fury weapon damage is increased by 10%, and whenever you crash Lightning, whenever it hits a single enemy, it also activates Wind Fury weapon. Natural Gift is going to simply be a nature damage bonus increase, and Descending Skies allows your Ascendants to upgrade your next Lightning Bolt to Tempest immediately. So whenever you pop Ascendants, you're able to go starting off with a strong opener. So it's going to be kind of nice for Stormbringer to have some additional guaranteed burst in the moment situation. For Totemic, we also have a brand new row at the right hand side, which has slightly different effectiveness depending on if you're Enhancement or Restoration, which is going to allow for some more build crafting. First one is going to be Totemic Momentum, where for Enhancement, Lava damage is increased by 10%, and each stack of Maelstrom weapon consumed increases the duration of your hot hand buff by 0.2 seconds, letting you extend it a little bit longer, which is kind of nice. For Restoration, it reduces the CD cost of Healing Stream Totem by 3 seconds to let you use it a little bit more regularly. Below that is Elemental Attunement, which is a simple mastery buff for both specs. And then finally, Primal Catalyst, where for Enhancement, after casting your Surging Totem, your next level Lash casts again at 150% effectiveness, so you can get some big burst value out of it immediately. While for Restoration, Healing Stream Totem and Healing Tide Totem have a 20% chance to apply Earth Living to any ally it heals. From there, we get to move on to the Shaman class talents, and they've kind of streamlined and slimmed the talent tree a little bit, with the starting abilities being your Lava Lash or Lava Burst depending on your spec, Chain Lightning, as well as Chain Heal. So it kind of been streamlined, as you can see, with a lot of the core abilities like Astral Shift, Capacitor Totem all brought towards the center, even things like Systemic Projection and Cleanse Spirit are brought to the center. There's a lot more pathways to the talents, so you can reach a lot of those baseline abilities a lot more easily. But for the most part, what they did is remove the number of talents out of the tree as well. Like Thunderstorm is now no longer a Shaman ability, it is now Elemental only, which is super unfortunate because it's so good for that group utility. But Thunderstorm unfortunately is gone for Resto and Enhancement. Lightning Lasso has been moved to the PvP talents. Stone Bulwark Totem defensively is gone as well. Totemic Recall has also been removed, so you can't reset your totems. And Guardian's Cudgel, which was an upgrade for Capacitor Totem to get double stuns, which was amazing in PvP, also has been removed, which is unfortunate. However, like I said, a lot of the talents have been shifted, so like your wall, some of your movement talents, for example, have been made a little bit easier for you to be able to attain defense or mobility, which is super, super nice. They also got a couple of different choice notes, such as Tremor and Poison Totem are now share a slot against one another, so it's going to be a little bit less utility that you could pick up within your totem specifically. They also ended up changing the way Earth Elemental works. It is now a 3-minute cooldown instead of a 5-minute, but lasts for 30 seconds instead of a minute. So you can use it technically more regularly in dodges for emergency situations. And for it being up for like 30 seconds, it's actually, I guess, not the worst, since usually we'll use it just to momentarily draw aggro while you res the tank. So that potentially could be good in the long term. And then they did also give a nice little capstone here called Instinctive Imbuements, which is like a nice quality of life buff. Whenever you use your lightning shield, it grants you additional primary stats, 3% intellect or agility. But also whenever you use lightning shield, it automatically applies things like earth shield, as well as any known weapon imbuements immediately. So normally shamans have a little bit of a setup before a dungeon, before a raid. You got to make sure each weapon has an imbuement if you're enhancement, or just single weapon if you're resto or ele. Pop Earth Shield, pop Lightning Shield, and then you're good to go. So now you'll be able to do all of that buff up with a single button, which is super, super nice, and I think it's going to be really, really cool as well. So now all you need to do is Wind Fury and then Instinctive Imbuements with a Lightning Shield, and you're good to go. From there, we have the spec of Elemental Shaman, which is going through a number of changes. One of the things you'll notice is certain talents, such as Liquid Magma Totem, have been removed. The Storm Elemental is no longer a thing that shares with Fire Elemental, which is the baseline, though you can still pop a Storm Elemental through Fury of the Storms, which summons a greater Storm Elemental for 10 seconds, which is more or less how you'll be calling that Storm Elemental, but now you can have both Storm and Fire Elemental active at the same time. The Fire Elemental just is like its own mechanic that you don't necessarily replace as a Shaman anymore. And also the whole frosty elements of this spec has been removed from the left-hand side of the talent tree completely. So the whole Ice Fury, Frost Shock type of gameplay is, for the most part, gone for Elemental, which is super, super weird. And some of the things you'll notice is Fire Elemental is now as a 2-minute cooldown, so that's a little adjustment in order to give a more standardized CD rates for the most part, though things like Ascendance are a baseline 3-minute for the most part still, so you do have some abilities that are desynced a little bit in that regard specifically. Earthquake as an ability has been changed to do nature damage to enemies that are standing on it instead of physical damage, which was always weird if it did physical damage before, but thematically kind of cool because it's like, you know, earth rumbling below you, so it didn't really hit you with like a nature hit. But this change actually allows any nature-based damage buffs to benefit Earthquake as well. So for Elemental, this potentially could be some decent bit of damage. They also have a couple of choice notes like Tectonic Collapse and Aftershock. Aftershock gives you a chance to refund Maelstrom on Earthquake, Ele Blast, or Earthshock, while Tectonic Collapse gives those abilities more damage. So you can have more consistent damage amp for your Maelstrom spenders, or potentially a return on them, which can be nice for spamming some of those abilities back to back to back. That's also kind of cool. And there's a number of passive talents that you'll find within the talent tree. Some of these are familiar and some are a little different, but also some talents that you've actually seen in the past in terms of like their actual buffs. They're still the same as they were, they're just in a slightly different position within the talent tree. So it's not like Elemental Shaman really has gone through too many new changes. There is a cool thing, like whenever you pop Ascendance, you also summon a Fire Elemental, so even if you play in the 3-minute Ascendance, you always get the benefit of Elemental, which is kind of cool, actually. But yeah, for the most part, there's not too many new things. There is a new talent, however, called Voltaic Blaze, which is pretty awesome. And both them and Enhancement Shamans get it. Voltaic Blaze essentially makes the Flame Shock maintenance more of an active ability, since your rotation has been simplified greatly. Voltaic Blaze replaces your Primordial Wave ability with like a stronger version of a Flame Shock that instantly shocks the target, doing a bunch of nature damage, and spreads Flame Shocks to 5 nearby targets. So if you need an ability that always spreads shocks to targets, like for AoE, but also something that always is a guaranteed critical strike at the same time, Voltaic Blaze is a great ability for it specifically. That also generates a decent bit of Maelstrom that makes Flame Shock less of a maintenance, but more of like an active ability that you can use in between. There's a couple other talents that flow off of it, like Voltaic Blaze cooldown can be further reduced and its damage is further increased. But also you can have Voltaic Blaze unleash Volcanic Rage, causing the next lava burst to also fire at the additional targets that are targeted by Flame Shock. So you can Voltaic Blaze into a lava burst for some much needed cleave damage, which is also really cool. So it becomes a more active ability that you can now weave into your Shaman based gameplay, which is pretty awesome. For the most part though, Elemental Shaman's rotation is being simplified greatly in Midnight though. Elemental will be focused primarily on pressing things like Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt, and Chain Lightning as your basic ability, removing a lot of the frosty interaction altogether. Though if you are looking for that Frost Shock interaction with Ice Blade and things like that, you still have Voltaic Blaze that now takes place of that. So instead of pressing Ice Sphere, you're now pressing Voltaic Blaze, which is just to Flame Shock. So you can make Flame Shock more active or just a passive mechanic depending on your build. And then from there, you just spin Maelstrom on Earthquakes, Earth Shocks, or Alley Blasts, but for the most part, your rotation is simplified. What many Shamans have noticed over on the Alpha is veteran players will likely be less happy with this design change, but newer players or not super experienced players with Shaman will actually find the spec a lot more palpable. So if you're someone who played old, like if you played Shaman for a while and you enjoy the complexity and the rotational flow and the intricacies of older builds, you may find this current Shaman less engaging, but still very effective. But a newer player will find it very straightforward and super easy to pick up. So it's going to be a bit of a mix and match depending on the type of player that you are. Your Apex Talents are somewhat consequential, but you'll see what I mean when we get through them. It's called Feedback Loop, which increases your elemental overload damage by 35%. The next trait of that Apex Talent increases your spell crit strike chance and crit strike damage chance by 5 to 10%, but damage by up to additional 50% more damage. So crit base damage and burst damage is going to be huge for elemental overall. The final trait allows elemental overloads a 25% chance to cause an additional elemental overload. So while it is a decent bit of potential damage with this trait, it's very much an RNG fiesta of this whole feedback loop. It's more like an RNG loop than anything, because their elemental overload damage, you first have to chance it, but if it does hit, it hits a little harder. If it does hit, it may crit, and if it does crit, it hits a little harder, and if it does hit and crit and hits a little harder, it has a chance to hit again, and then it has a chance to try starting this loop all over again, though it can only overload this once for that additional overload. So it is very RNG. So maybe this will be good, maybe it won't be good. It all depends on the consistency, but if you're not a big fan of like RNG type of specs, it does seem like Elemental is kind of slowly heading into the direction little by little. Next, we have Enhancement Shaman, and they're probably getting the biggest adjustment when it comes to the rotational bloat rework when it comes to Midnight. And out of all the specs out there, Enhancement is the one that's getting standardized probably the most, because they technically had a lot of build variability, whether you're playing like a Storm Strike build where you prioritize Storm Strike and go big Wind Fury, big Wind Strikes, big Ascendants, or you're playing more like Lava Lash Elementalist build where you're moving in Lightning Bolts and Alley Blasts and Frost abilities and Fire abilities, and then Storm Strike when there's nothing else really to do. So you had a lot of variability, but that variability has been narrowed down. Both abilities like Storm Strike and Lava Burst or Lava Lash will have value depending on the build you have, but you'll still use both of these abilities just slightly differently and prioritize them slightly differently. But they'll still be like very core abilities. Your rotation won't completely ignore certain spells and certain skills depending on how you set your character up. So for them, when it comes to some of the different talents and some of the different abilities that they're going to play into, there's a lot of new changes that are really going to change the way that you play a class normally. Like Crash Lightning as an ability is now a more centerstone talent that you can't ignore anymore. And they're trying to make it more of a core ability that you will want to use, not just for AoE content, but as a regular ability between Crash Lightning, Storm Strike, and Lava Lash. And those will be your three core abilities that you'll be primarily using outside of a handful of other skills to generate most of your Maelstrom, and then you spend it so that you could use those abilities again. And the way that you're going to use Crash Lightning, similarly with your like Apex Talents, is more like a maintenance buff more than anything. But one thing that you'll notice with Crash Lightning is that no matter how many targets you hit, it always has this cleave capability. Previously, you had to hit a certain number of targets to activate the cleave. Now the cleave is going to be active all the time. So if you want to play Enhancement Shaman and there's like a situation where you go from single target damage to a cleave damage, as long as you have a Crash Lightning rolling, you're always passively cleaving someone if it's within range. So that's going to be really nice from that melee perspective. From there, a lot of the talents that you have here are really not that different. It's a lot of familiar options or really straightforward options that are not necessarily changing the gameplay too much. Though a lot of Shamans are going to miss that frosty interaction of the Ice Blade, Frost Shock, and the cleaving components of Hailstorm. So very similar to how Elemental Shamans are losing frosty abilities and they're getting Voltaic Blaze instead, so is Enhancement Shaman. Voltaic Blaze essentially replaces the whole frost damage mechanic of that frosty cleave, but also giving you a powerful hit. It turns your Flame Shock from a maintenance buff to more of an active ability that hits fairly hard, and very similar to the Elemental Shaman, it has a lot of that same big burst value and big burst potential, especially in that cleave and AoE content, and they wanted to make it a very satisfying button overall that you will want to press if that is the type of build that you're really going for on your Shaman, which is also pretty cool. They also wanted to make AoE damage a little bit easier as Shaman, so Ride the Lightning allows Storm Strike and Lava Lash to also unleash a Chain Lightning at 100% effectiveness that deals 20% reduced damage with each jump. So if you're looking for additional raw AoE lightning themed damage, Ride the Lightning is going to give you a little bit extra of this lashing potential. Talents like Elemental Tempo are also very core to the skill as it gives you more elemental damage, but also each stack of Maelstrom that you consume helps you reduce the cooldown of Storm Strike and Lava Lash by 0.3 seconds, which allows you to keep those abilities as your core skills for Maelstrom generation. But even though they have a longer cooldown, spending Maelstrom allows you to regain those abilities back quicker, so it helps your rotation from being too stagnant and reduces the downtime that you may have as an enhancement, giving you always a button to press at almost all times. Doom Winds is also a very core cooldown right now for Shaman, and if that's what you're looking to do, looking to be a 1-minute burst class, you will be able to without necessarily having to invest points into Ascendance, because talents like Static Accumulation benefits Ascendance as well as Doom Winds, as well as even Thorn's Invocation benefits Doom Winds as well. So you can always go for Ascendance to be a 3-minute burst class, or you can just go for like a 2-minute burst class with Thorn's Invocation. Or you can just not go Ascendance at all and just bank all your damage and be a 1-minute class with Doom Winds. Your damage profile is going to be a little flatter, but you're going to have a more of a sustained profile with very short burst, but not nearly as spiky of a burst, but it gives you a little bit of flexibility over how you play your cooldowns. The one thing that I didn't like about Shaman is I'm so used to summoning Ghost Souls. I'm having them be weaved in as part of my gameplay to add that elemental, like elementalist type of feel towards my melee Shaman was always fun. However, they are pruning wolves out as a basic rotational ability. You now only get to summon wolves when casting Sunder or Doom Winds. Sundering summons a fire spirit to aid you, while Doom Wind summons a nature spirit to aid you. So instead of having like 3 different spirits of frost, nature, and fire, or baseline wolves to increase your physical damage, you don't have anything like that. Wolves are just an extra add-on bonus, but they don't necessarily like become part of your basic day-to-day gameplay, which I think takes away from some of that old school Enhancement Shaman feel. If you play the original versions of Shaman, where wolves were integral to the playstyle, they're going to be less so, it looks like, in Midnight. As for the Apex talents, like I said, your Crash Lightning is going to become more of a basic rotational skill and more of a maintenance buff thanks to your new Apex talents of Storm Unleashed. The Storm Unleash, each Maelstrom weapon you spend has a 2% chance to cause your Crash Lightning to ignore its own cooldown to be usable again. And this weapon enhancement effect on Crash Lightning may overlap, so you can stack up those cleavy type of benefits. With the second trait, Maelstrom weapon spending abilities deal more damage, and weapon movements will deal additional damage as well. Then you also have the final trait where Crash Lightning electrocutes the area struck, dealing additional nature damage to the ground, but also the weapon enhancement effects are now increases auto attack speed by 15%, so which will give you more procs of your Wind Fury weapon, but also your Flame Tongue weapon as well. Which at its core makes Crash Lightning a much more important ability that you'll definitely want to weave in heavily if you end up playing a build that heavily invests into the Apex talent specifically. And when it comes to restoration, this is where we're seeing the biggest number of pruning for a healer. And a lot of healers are going through a lot of pruning, so you shouldn't be surprised by how much is being gutted out of resto. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that is just, they're really cutting down a lot of the fat from this spec to make it super thin and super clear cut. Abilities like Cloudburst Totem, Earthen Wall Totem, Ancestral Protection Totem, and Wellspring are all being removed, which were all high-impact abilities that required quite a lot of timing and skill to be used correctly. Tidal Waves, High Tide, Tidebringer, Undulation, and Master of the Elements, as well as Tide Turner, are also all removed. However, they are making abilities like your Chain Heal have naturally baked in 25% more jump range and 20% faster cast speed. The same thing goes for your healing wave as well. Unleash Life has also been reworked and has been placed towards more of center together on side with Earth Living to encourage more Earth Living or Unleash Life type of benefits. And it has a 20-second cooldown and causes your next heal to be more effective, but also reduces cast time of certain abilities by 30%. Also, Healing Wave as an ability by itself replaces your Healing Surge completely. Previously, you would have a Healing Surge, which was a faster heal that was more mana expensive, and a Healing Wave, which was a slower heal, but it was more mana efficient. So you do use one in emergency situations and the other in if you needed like certain ability synergies. So they're basically removing that completely. They're just giving you Healing Wave as a Rest of Shaman. It functions like a Healing Surge and a Healing Wave at the same time. It's essentially a Healing Wave with Healing Surge properties. So it simplifies the gameplay. You just have one button to cast as a single target heal for emergency or normal situations, but they give you all the different talent benefits in order to make it like as emergency healing at as fast pace as needed, depending on the situation and the content you're doing. Also, abilities like your Ascendance as well as your Tide Totem, which are at the top here, are now a choice. So now you can choose between Healing Tide Totem, which works better with Totemic, or Ascendance, which works better with Farseer, which essentially becomes a talent of like which hero spec are you currently playing. And the interesting thing about the gameplay in Midnight for Restoration Shaman is it's gotten easier than ever. For the most part, you will heal with abilities like Unleashed Life, Riptide, Healing Stream Totem, Healing Rain, and Downpour, and fill any healing gaps with Healing Wave for single target or Chain Heal in AoE. But you still have a lot of other major cooldowns that really define what a Restoration Shaman is, like Spirit Link, Healing Tide, or Ascendance, which you'll be using for big damage situations while still maintaining abilities like Earth Shield on your allies at the same time. But it looks like they're trying to really allow you to choose what type of flavor of Restoration Shaman you're running, but are simplifying the core of it down to the most basic level, which I don't think, if tuned correctly, should make the Shaman worse in terms of like competitiveness. But if you're someone who's a veteran player and love the intricacy and difficulty of the spec before, this may be one of your least favorite options of Shaman going forward. I do think the Apex talent is really cool, which I think can synergize with Totemic super well, but it's not necessarily made to be forcefully synergized with Totemic if that's what you don't want to play. But their Apex talent is Stormstream Totem, which gives you a brand new totem. Riptide has a chance to upgrade your next Healing Tide Totem into a Stormstream Totem. This totem does more healing, but also heals 3 allies at once. So this totem is going to be better at group healing, but also just be more effective variation. With the next trait, you're simply increasing the healing of your Healing Stream and Stormstream Totem as well. And the final trait allows Stormstream Totem to start be usable for free as soon as you get the proc for it. So even if you have 2 charges of Healing Stream Totem down already and you get an upgrade for Stormstream Totem, you can have 2 Healing Streams and Stormstream at the same time. So you could potentially have like a bunch of little totems. So for Totemic that heavily leans into that totem-based gameplay, this could be really, really good in a long haul. But with that, as always, I do want to thank you guys all so much for watching, and I hope you guys did enjoy this midnight update. If you did enjoy this class overhaul, or class overview rather, and find it informative, go ahead and give this video a like, as I would very much appreciate it. Also, be sure to join our Discord community, especially if you want to keep up with any newest midnight updates, as it's going to be heading into beta very soon. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think about these Shaman changes? And as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.